All right, so get this, everyone. We're going deep on India's economic reforms. The ones over the past 25 years.
Yeah.
We've got Yashwant Sinha's book, The Future of Indian Economy. Some other cool stuff, too. It's like how they go from, major crisis to, boom, one of the fastest growing economies.
It's a wild ride, for sure. You almost have to start with that crisis, 1991. That's where it all begins.
Okay, yeah, set the scene for us.
Picture this. India. Barely any foreign reserves left. Enough for maybe 3 weeks of imports. That's it.
Oh, wow.
And the IMF guy at the time, I think he was the managing director, actually said, if the fund can't help, we're shutting it down.
Whoa.
Yeah.
They were that close to just everything stopping.
No kidding. It was dire. Now, how'd they get there? Well, Rajiv Gandhi's government, some fiscal, let's call it mismanagement.
Right, so spending too much.
Basically, yeah, debt piled up, then global economy throws a few punches too, Not a good combo.
Perfect storm kind of thing.
You got it. Enter Narasimha Rao's government. Manmohan Singh, he's finance minister. They knew it was time to, shake things up.
What'd they do? To get out of that mess.
Bold moves. Devalued the rupee right off the bat.
Makes things cheaper to export, pricier to import, yeah.
Yep. Went to the IMF, needed that lifeline. But the real change, that budget, man, that budget, liberalization, it was a whole new direction.
Liberalization, so less government control, more free market, right?
Exactly. Open the doors, invite foreign investment, a big shift. And here's the thing, compared to other countries trying the same thing, India, they kind of nailed it.
What was their edge?
Sinha, the guy whose book we're talking about, he says it's partly about what India already had. Entrepreneurs, they were there. Education system, not bad. Skilled people, legal stuff already in place. Other countries, they didn't have that foundation,
So it wasn't just flip a switch, free market. It was built on something.
Right. And this leads to Sinha's big idea, the developmental state.
Okay, so not just hands off, let the market do its thing.
No, the state, it's got to be active. Guide things, make sure the market helps with development, not just, profits for some.
So find that balance, market doing its thing, but with some direction.
Right on. And Sinha, he says this great line, government that fails at intervening, it'll fail liberalization too.
Makes sense. Can't just step back and hope for the best.
Nope. All right, so we've got the setup, crisis, then liberalization, building on what they had, and this idea of the state being involved. Now we got to get specific. What did these reforms actually change?
Yeah, get down to the details.
Well, trade, that was huge. Import liberalization, big time. Started with capital goods, the machinery and stuff industries need.
Okay, make it easier to get that stuff in.
Yep. Then it was consumer goods, even agriculture. Less restrictions, more open.
But wasn't there, worry about hurting local businesses if things opened up too fast?
Oh, for sure. And it wasn't always smooth sailing. But the big picture, away from that old EXIM policy, all about controlling things, towards a foreign trade policy, more open, more global.
Right, which is what led to that whole Make in India push, right?
Bingo. 2015, that policy, it was about getting India into those global supply chains, attracting investment, becoming a manufacturing, powerhouse, all part of that liberalization thing we talked about.
But here's what's weird. Despite all this opening up, India's piece of global trade, it actually shrunk at first, right after the reforms. What's up with that?
Yeah, that's the thing about economics. Sometimes change doesn't mean instant success. Gotta adjust. Sometimes there's hiccups.
Growing pains?
Exactly. Eventually, their share of trade did go up, but yeah, it wasn't a straight shot.
So lesson learned. These things, they take time.
For sure. Now, alongside all that trade stuff, capital markets, they got a makeover too, making the whole financial system, more dynamic, easier to access.
Okay, so how'd they do that?
Big move was free pricing for equity. Basically, market decides the price of shares, not the government.
Big shift, yeah. But what about rules? Making sure things were fair, no funny business.
Oh, yeah. That was when SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, they stepped up big time.
So SEBI became like the referee, making sure everyone played by the rules.
You got it. And the market. Boom. New investment stuff came out, gold ETFs, mutual funds got big, more regular people could invest now.
So not just the super rich, more democratized, kinda.
Exactly. And then there's taxes, man, taxes. They went on a mission to simplify things, direct taxes, less brackets, lower rates, the highest rate. They brought it down.
I'm sure you've got the exact numbers in that book. We'll put them in the show notes for anyone who wants to get into the weeds.
Sounds good.
But what was the idea behind all this tax stuff? Just making it easier on people, or was there more to it?
Simplifying, yeah, but also think bigger picture. Lower taxes, especially for businesses. That's like saying, come invest, help India grow, we'll make it easier. And then, of course, there's the saga of GST.
Oh, yeah, GST. That was huge news for a while, wasn't it?
It was a long road, committees, recommendations, but 2017, they finally did it. The potential is massive.
So GST, basically streamlining the whole tax thing, right?
Yeah.
Making it cleaner, simpler, a unified national market.
Yep, that was the goal. Has some bumps along the way, though, especially for small businesses trying to adapt.
Sure, makes sense. But the idea is long-term, it's good for everyone.
Yes, that's the thinking. More foreign investment, lower costs for businesses, even potentially more jobs. It's that classic short-term pain, long-term gain situation.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got trade, capital markets, taxes. What else was on their reform hit list?
The monetary side of things, how money moves, interest rates, all that good stuff.
So that's where the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, comes in, right?
Exactly. Big change was giving the RBI more muscle, more independence from the government.
So less political interference, more like expert decisions.
Yep, that was key for keeping the rupee stable. They also got rid of those ad hoc treasury bills, which meant the government had to borrow at regular market rates, no special treatment.
Level playing field, even for the government.
You got it. And then they brought in this thing called open market operations. Basically, buying and selling government bonds to control how much money is out there helps with inflation.
Okay, I'll admit that one's a bit over my head, but the gist is RBI got more tools and more freedom to, like, steer the ship.
You got it. And all this trade, markets, taxes, monetary policy, it set the stage for India's economy to, well, kind of explode in a good way.
But economic growth, that's just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Mm.
What about people, everyday folks? Did their lives actually get better?
That's the million-dollar question, and that's what we're going to dive into next time. Stay tuned as we unpack the whole idea of inclusive growth in India.
So we've laid the groundwork, those early reforms, pulling India back from the brink, setting a new course. But did it actually work? Did things improve for, like, the average person in India?
That's the question, isn't it? In economics, it's rarely a simple answer. But yeah, there's no denying India's economy, it saw some serious gains after those reforms.
Okay, so let's talk numbers. What are we looking at here?
Well, GDP, that's the big one. It grew like 6 times bigger since the reform started. India's a $2 trillion economy now. And for a while there, it was the second fastest growing, among the big economies, right behind China.
I think I even read somewhere that with how they calculate GDP now and China slowing down, India might actually be the fastest growing, like number one.
Yeah, the World Bank's got some pretty optimistic projections for India. Could be outpacing China soon, but there's a but here.
The but being, did everyone benefit? Inclusive growth, all that.
Exactly, because you look at GDP, it's one story, but then you check out something like the UN Human Development Index, life expectancy, education, all that. India's ranking there, it's kind of stuck around 130th place.
So economy booming, but those benefits, they aren't reaching everyone equally.
That's it. And it brings us back to Sinha, right? That whole developmental state thing. He's saying, just relying on the market, hoping it'll trickle down, it's not enough.
It's like you've got this fancy car, powerful engine, but the steering's messed up. You can have all that power, but you're not going anywhere, or you're going to crash.
Perfect analogy. The state, it needs to be active. Make sure growth means better education, healthcare, all those basics. Guide things in the right direction.
But then you've got other experts saying, whoa, too much government, that's what messed things up before. Too much intervention can actually hurt growth, right?
For sure, it's a balancing act. We've got this piece by Mani Shankar Iyer, makes a good point about this. He's saying the way India delivers those anti-poverty programs, it's too centralized, too bureaucratic, too much room for, well, corruption.
He even says something like 25% of the money for those programs, it just disappears in admin costs. Crazy, right?
It is, and it goes back to that need for good governance. Money's not the only answer. Got to make sure it gets to the people who need it.
Systems need to work. People in charge need to be accountable, all that.
Right. And Iyer, he challenges this idea of a single poverty line for the whole country, saying it's too simple, doesn't capture all the different ways people can be disadvantaged.
Like using one ruler to measure everyone's happiness.
Yeah.
Everyone's different, right?
Exactly. So growth is important, but it's not the whole story. Got to empower communities, give them a say in their own development, address all those different aspects of poverty.
Which brings us to fiscal reform, how the government handles its money, basically.
Right. We've got this analysis by D.K. Shrivasaiva. He points out the challenges, trying to balance things, investing in the future, education, healthcare, infrastructure, all that. But at the same time, got to keep debt under control. Not easy.
Because even with good intentions, if money's being wasted, siphoned off, it undermines everything else.
Absolutely. Shrivastava, he's pushing for more efficiency, more transparency. How's the money being spent? Who's accountable? Those are the questions.
And then there's a whole debate about subsidies.
Hmm.
Helping the poor, yes, but also potential for waste, distorting the market, right?
Totally. And that's just one piece. Agriculture, infrastructure, capital markets, trade, it's all connected, always changing.
Sounds overwhelming. Where do you even start?
Well, that's what we'll tackle next. Dig into those specific areas, see what worked, what didn't, and what we can learn from India's experience.
All right, so let's zoom in on some specific areas where these reforms played out, starting with agriculture. I mean, it's huge for India, right? Millions of people depend on it.
Absolutely, it's the backbone of the economy. But one of our sources, Yoginder K. Allah, he points out something kind of surprising. Agricultural growth, it actually slowed down in the mid-90s, right when those early reforms were kicking in.
Really? That's not what you'd expect.
Nope. Even jobs in agriculture, not growing much. Allah says farmers, they weren't making as much money back then. And government spending on things like irrigation, fertilizer, it dropped too.
So those reforms, maybe they didn't help agriculture as much, at least at first.
That's his argument. But things did change later on. Allah says more recently, the government started investing more in agriculture again. And the prices farmers get for their crops, they've been going up compared to, the stuff they have to buy. Fertilizers, that sort of thing.
So things got better, eventually, but it still sounds like there's work to do.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Allah, he brings up this interesting example, pulse policy.
Pulses, you mean like lentils, beans?
Yeah, those. Turns out India imports a lot of pulses, then sells them cheap within the country, subsidized prices.
Sounds good for people, right? Makes food more affordable.
That's the idea. But Allah says it actually ends up helping farmers in other countries, the ones exporting the pulses, more than it helps Indian farmers.
So it's like trying to do something good, but it backfires.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
Allah, he thinks there's a better way. Link domestic prices with tariffs, import taxes. That way you can protect Indian farmers, make growing pulses more profitable here.
So even well-intentioned policies, got to think them through, see the whole picture.
Totally. Okay, let's switch gears. Talk infrastructure, roads, railways, ports, all that. Essential for a modern economy, right?
And India's got so many people, it's got to be a massive challenge just to keep up.
It is. We've got this overview by Ela Patnaik and Ajay Shah. They highlight the progress since '91, especially getting private companies involved. But they also say, look, there are still big gaps.
Yeah, like I read that freight trains in India, they're still super slow. It
Yeah.
hasn't changed much in decades. That's got to hurt businesses.
Big time. They point out China, they've been investing way more in their railways, leaving India in the dust. Shows you reforms, got to keep at it, can't get complacent.
So what's the solution? Just spend more money.
They say it's not that simple, got to change how things are done, regulations, all that, and focus on maintaining what we have, upgrading stuff. They even talk about splitting up the railways, separating who owns the tracks from who runs the trains, more competition, that kind of thing.
So got to get creative, try new approaches.
Right. Now, power sector, that's another one where reforms, well, they haven't quite delivered.
Yeah, I know millions of people in India still don't have electricity. And even if you do, power cuts, they're like a regular thing.
It's a mess. BBL Madhukar, he wrote this analysis basically saying the power sector, it's still inefficient. Private companies, they're mostly just generating power, not really involved in getting it to people. And those state electricity boards, the SABs, they're a drain on the system.
He even calls them white elephants. Ouch.
Yeah, not good. He says we need bigger changes, maybe even privatizing some of those SABs. Got to make sure people have reliable, affordable electricity.
Okay, so some areas, mixed results. But capital markets, that's one where India seemed to have done really well.
Definitely. UK Sinha, he ran SEBI for a while, wrote about it. They made the market more transparent. Companies had to disclose more info, protected investors better, built trust, introduced new ways to invest, made it easier for regular folks to get involved.
Sounds like they were really trying to level the playing field.
Yeah, that was the goal. And they pushed for better corporate governance, too. Companies being run ethically, responsibly, it's all connected.
Makes sense. Now, last but not least, trade policies. We talked about that initial dip in India's share of global trade. What happened after that?
It recovered gradually. They point to the foreign trade policy. It shifted things away from protectionism towards engaging with the global economy, but strategically,
So open up, but be smart about it.
Exactly. That's where things like Make in India come in. Boost domestic manufacturing, make stuff here, export more. They even talk about the Exim Bank, the Export-Import Bank,
Yeah.
helping Indian companies going global.
So trade, it's not just about making stuff, it's about the financial side too.
Yep, got to have that support system. So there you have it. India's economic reforms, the highs, the lows, the challenges.
It's a complex story, for sure. But what I'm taking away is reform, it never really ends. Got to keep adapting, keep learning.
And it's not just about policies, it's about the people, the institutions, making sure those policies actually work for everyone. It's about balance, finding that sweet spot between liberalization and the role of the state, between growing the economy and making sure everyone benefits.
It's India's story, and it's still being written. Hopefully this deep dive has given everyone a better understanding of where they've been, where they are, and all those possibilities for the future.
Yeah, and hopefully it's made you curious. Go check out those sources we mentioned, dig deeper, form your own opinions, because India's economy, it's ultimately about the people. And that's a story worth paying attention to.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.